It's past 8 now.
The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Talking politics with Russel Norman.
Co-leader of the Greens, Russel Norman, talking green politics with us. Good morning to you, Russell.
Good morning, Wammo. How's it going?
Very, very well. Now, on the back of the budget last week, the government has started floating ideas, not in this term, but has started putting out ideas of asset sales. And one of them that I think it was Bill English was talking about was Kiwi Bank, possibly selling off Kiwi Bank. What they say is to mum and dad investors. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, mum and dad investors already own Kiwi Bank. They're citizens of New Zealand, and collectively we currently own Kiwi Bank. That's why its slogan is, "It's ours." So what he's proposing to do is take it off mum and dad investors and give it to overseas owners, because that's eventually where it's going to end up. Once you start selling shares of Kiwi Bank, sooner or later they're going to be concentrated in overseas hands.
The term mum and dad is very emotive, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Bill's trying to, make some kind of emotional connection, but he's doing the exact opposite. I mean, currently it's owned by all of us.
You put out a statement this week saying that it could affect the economy negatively if part of Kiwi Bank was sold off. What do you mean by that?
Well, the New Zealand finance sector is already very heavily dominated by the overseas-owned Australian banks. They've got about 90% of banking assets that are owned by the four big Australian banks. And what that means is that every year large amounts of money are taken out of the New Zealand economy and sent back to Australia. And so that means, I think it's in the last 5 years, it's about $9.5 billion has been extracted from New Zealand, Australia as a dividend. Each year the Australian banks, they pay out on average about 2/3 of all the profits as dividends, and about 1/3 is left in New Zealand.
Yeah.
So just means that if we add more overseas ownership to the New Zealand banking sector, that we're going to have even more money drained overseas, and it's going to make it worse for our current account deficit.
But can the government put in rules to say that only New Zealanders can invest, or is that against the rules in order to say something like that?
No, they wouldn't be able to put in those kind of rules under both the CER, the arrangement with Australia, the economic agreement with Australia, closer economic relations, but also almost certainly under the GATS, the General Agreement on Trade and Services, requires national treatment, as it's called, under the General Agreement on Trade and Services. And so I think they'd find it very difficult to put a rule that says only New Zealanders can buy shares in Kiwi Bank.
So when they say mum and dad investors, they really can't control that at all. They can put it out there and mum and dad investors can try to get in, but if other overseas investors get in first, then tough luck.
Yeah. I mean, what you could do is when you privatise it, theoretically you could sell the parcels with a maximum amount per person. But sooner or later, over time, those parcels are going to be on-sold and concentrated. I mean, the logic of the banking sector is concentration, and so slowly over time, the ownership of Kiwi Bank will fall into the overseas owners, like all the other finance sector.
Okay, well, from one state-owned enterprise to another, now looking at Solid Energy, they're looking into getting into the business of Lignite. Turning lignite in Southland into liquid fuel and higher grade coal with Lignite Energy, that's Ignite Energy Resources. What is lignite anyway?
Lignite's it's a low quality coal. It's the lowest of the quality coals. It's above peat, if you like. So the process of creating coal and oil, you have all of the vegetable matter that came together during the Carboniferous age, and slowly gets pressured and heated up, and slowly gets cooked, and it starts as vegetable matter heat, and it ends up as oil. Along the way, you get different kinds of quality of coal get formed, and so you start with your lignites and you work your way through. So it's very low quality coal.
Okay, so they're looking into getting the business of, I suppose, upselling it, upgrading it, turning it into something useful. Yeah, that's right. It's kind of the end game of the human race. So if we decide to dig all the coal out of the ground, including lignite, which produces high amounts of greenhouse emissions per unit of energy because it's low quality, if we decide to dig all the rest of the coal out of the ground and burn it, then that's out of control climate change. So Solid Energy and companies like it all around the world, but particularly in Australia, but all around the world, who are engaged in digging coal out of the ground, they're proposing that we finish the job off that we started with oil, and really get completely out of control climate change.
So you're saying that we're scraping the bottom of the barrel with Lignite?
Well, it's scraping the bottom of the barrel, but it's also, we're making a conscious decision to end our civilization if we go and dig up all the lignite and the coal. We're just saying that's it, we don't really care, and so we're going to completely transform the climate on planet Earth. We can make that decision, though we are making it on behalf of future generations rather than ourselves. But I think it's a pretty stupid thing to do.
Of course, the situation in the Gulf of Mexico, I suppose, is not only highlighting, of course, the climate change issue, but also just the what can go wrong even before the fuel is even used. What's kind of natural disasters it can create. Have you been looking at oil exploration around New Zealand? And are there any safeguards against a similar situation here?
The real issue actually around oil exploration in New Zealand, and particularly deep water, which we're looking at in the Southern Basin, which is similar to Deepwater Horizon, the BP well that they can't control.
Yeah.
Once you get into deep water drilling, if something goes wrong, it's just so far down, it's very difficult to get your hands on the thing and stop it, which is what BP's finding. So in New Zealand, there isn't even a proper regulatory framework for it, because we don't have the legislation in place. We don't even have a proper regulatory framework to deal with deep-sea oil drilling. But putting that to one side, I mean, presumably you can develop a proper regulatory framework, but then the question is, what are the environmental safeguards? And at this stage, it's not clear that the government is really giving much attention to that.
Because it sounds, just looking at an article this morning, it sounds really innovative and it's quite a cool idea, but you've got to wonder sort of what sort of people it's going to attract. This idea that the government has put a mapping program along with Google and started to lure more gas explorers to New Zealand by putting results on Google Earth of our mineral and geophysical and geological deposits around New Zealand. So, you can be anywhere in the world and go, oh, that's quite nice down there in New Zealand, I think I'll go and have a look.
Yeah, I mean, it's another subsidy to National's extractive industry strategy, because National's economic strategy doesn't go anything much beyond let's do what we did to the whales and the kauri and the kauri gum and the seals, like just short-term extractive industry.
Yeah.
And so they want to subsidise the mining industry by providing them with all the data about where the minerals might be. And then on top of that, this seismic testing is not innocuous. The problem with seismic testing is it's like a giant sonic boom underwater. And if you happen to be a whale that's in the way, then it can physically damage you. And of course, whales survive through their ability to listen. So
Wow.
It can be lethal for whales. And then, obviously, the next problem is once you start drilling, how do you control the leaks?
Yeah. Russel Norman, enjoy the rest of that lovely smooth Wellington bus ride. I can hear that beautiful electric engine going on there in the background. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, thanks very much.
See ya. Co-leader of the Greens, it is Russel Norman.